Good morning, everybody. Reverend Father Ang and all the officers of the University of Santo Tomas, Reverend Father Aparicio and Dean Maglinaw, and all the officers of the Faculty of Medicine and Surgery and the members of the faculty, Mr. D. and Metrobank Foundation representatives, and all my friends. Good morning. Thank you to the Metrobank Foundation for the Doña Victoria Ty Tan Professorial Chair in Medical Education. Thank you to the UST Research and Endowment Fund, Incorporated, for naming me the chair. And especially thank you to Dean Lourdes Maglinaw, Dr. Melvin Marshall, and Dr. Clifton Pe, and all who made this happen. My relationship with Metrobank Foundation dates back to 1991, when I received the Metrobank Outstanding Teacher Collegiate Award. It consisted of a trophy confirmed by President Aquino, 60,000 pesos, which I used to buy my first laptop. 15 years later, Metrobank Foundation gave me a second award for continued excellence in service. That time, it was only a ceremony and a medallion. No president, no money. Today, it is the Metrobank Professorial Chair, Doña Victoria Ty Tan, Chair in Medical Education. Your presence, my colleagues and friends, make this the most memorable. I am honored, humbled, and grateful. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Okay. No one left the COVID experience unscathed. It changed our life. Caught off guard, the health professional had to adjust to restricted health service and resources, crisis standard of care. He was called upon to make immediate, heart-wrenching decisions, like how to prioritize an ICU bed or a ventilator, who should live and who should die, how to contend with frustrated families, all without the luxury of guidelines, experience, or time. This means more work, more stress, more moral injury. To the average physician, the pandemic brought unpredictability, economic stressors, and restrictive of liberties to move around, meet with friends, earn a living. It meant uncertainty, frustration, and fear. All of us had something of life slip away. And because of that, each of us became either a better or a worse person. Furthermore, COVID-19 is here to stay. More will suffer from the disease, as well as its long-term complications. Local spikes and further waves are inevitable. The new normal requires operating these surges alongside with the backlog demand for non-COVID services, with its unpredictable consequences and its persistent ethical challenges. Yet we cannot allow the combination of nuanced and complex, difficult decision-making and the constraints that that prevent us from acting in accordance to our values, to unsettle us and lead to moral distress. For the health professional, moral collapse will damage our ability to administer uniformly effective containment and care strategies. And for the whole population, it will erode personal and national morale. we must choose to be better. So the objective of this presentation is to share lessons from the COVID experience derived from readings, observations, and wishful thinking towards equipping you, the primary healthcare physician or the healthcare professional, with practical wisdom and moral insight needed to behave ethically so that you make day-to-day decisions and take actions that, despite that eerie feeling that things don't seem right, you still are able to get an ethical comfort in doing as much good as you can and achieve what Pope Francis tells us: to be joyful, to help without hesitation, and persevere, to become better persons. So what are the lessons learned? So this is my objective. From the COVID experience, we learned or relearned mainly two lessons. That is much beyond our control. Much in the unwanted world we are unable to modify. And for this we can surrender. And second, there is much more within our control, for which we can be trustworthy and act with virtue. Beyond our control include the incomplete knowledge regarding COVID-19. Although information has vastly improved, much remains temporary and incomplete. As a novel illness with limited experience, COVID-19 continuously evolves daily. There is new information about variants, transmission, preventive measures, complications, treatment, vaccines, and immunity. I'm sorry, I'm having. We still have no accurate measure to determine good care. The ubiquitous social media landscape, with its capacity to blur the distinction between truth and fiction, has created an infodemic of endless opinions, rampant misinformation and disinformation. They echoed fake news from COVIDologists, epistemic trespassers, pharmaceutical messiahs. Misinformation diffused significantly farther, faster, deeper, and more broadly than the truth. The urgent threat of the pandemic catapulted preprint servers and predatory journals without peer review, leading to a reproducibility crisis. The second thing about what is beyond our control is the nature of healthcare. COVID's precipitous course, a patient can progress from mild shortness of breath to respiratory arrest with dramatic rapidity. And the patient's isolation from family and friends make adjusting goals of care according to patient's values, which is an essential element of proper care, difficult for the already overwhelmed physician. Infection control measures threaten personalized, dignified, and humane care. Elements of nonverbal communication are inhibited by masks. The calming and reassuring gesture of touch is distorted by gloves. Distancing restrictions prohibit accompanying family members to assist patients coming for consultation or admission, which is so much of our Filipino value. ICU patients die alone. Scarce resources shift patient care to the greater public good. decisions on how to meet the individual's need give way to decisions of how to maximize public care. The third thing that is beyond our control occurs only in the Philippines. Particular to the Philippine situation are the emotional reactions that prevent reflective discussions on goals of care or advanced care planning. Poor governance was seen in the unprepared health system, with no clear, straightforward, easily comprehended directives that delayed appropriate action. Policies were not extensively announced or were announced without explanation of rationale, with subtle inconsistencies and selective enforcement. Leaders led with self-interest as their primary goal. So what is the lesson for those beyond our control? How should we respond to circumstances beyond our control? We should surrender. But to surrender does not mean to give up. Rather, it means to trust in the Lord, to accept with confidence that God's hand is upon us as we do our part. And what is our part? To focus on what we can control, to be trustworthy, to do the right thing for the right reason, to act virtuously, humbly, compassionately, and courageously. Trustworthiness. A trustworthy person can be predictably expected to act in the other's best interest and not yield to the allures of money, power, pleasure, or self-interest. A trustworthy person does not use another being as an object or a means merely to serve himself. He works rather with, rather than on, the student, patient, or research participant, making them partners in education, healthcare, delivery, or research. The heightened rhetoric and polarization in politics, the lack of transparency, the competing and contradictory COVID experience, the conflicts of interest, especially in industry-sponsored projects, the reports of unprofessional conduct have eroded the trust of the people in the health system. This lack of trust was obviously seen in the failed vaccination program. We must recover their trust. Only then will they cooperate and comply with health policy. And more importantly, it is only in being trustworthy that we can be satisfied in doing something good. To achieve this requires the virtues of humility, compassion, and courage. Humility was described by Jack Collaham as unflinching self-awareness. It combines looking inward, who I am, and what do I have, and looking outward at others with a self-forgetfulness that thinks of the other more than oneself. Humility is looking inwards as we determine, who am I? A child of God, called by Him to extend His healing mission. Always to be the highest expression of self, to serve as best I can. And what do I have? Talents, resources, and responsibilities to share these talents and resources, to be accountable, an accountable steward to society and to my God. As a clinician, to provide good health care, cooperate and contribute to public health policy. As a teacher, to always model good behavior, never to be part of a scandal or lead students to evil. As a citizen, to follow the law. I also have weaknesses, biases, and limitations. There are things I do not know and cannot do. I make mistakes, and so therefore I depend on others and I work within a system. So what are the lessons? Humbleness as looking forward, which is also termed humbleness. As we look at our talents and resources, we learn that we must share. Rather than build a larger barn, we must increase the people we help. I have a favorite study of Erna Bombeck titled Empty Pockets. Some of you may have heard me tell it before. Emma talks of a dream she had when she was asked to give an accounting of her life to a higher court. She was asked, "So empty your pockets. What have you got left in your life? Any dreams that were unfulfilled? Any unused talent that we gave you when you were born that you still have left? Any unsaid compliments or bits of love that you haven't spread around?" And Irma would answer, "I have nothing to return. I've spent everything you gave me. I'm as naked as the day I was born." Let us try to reach our higher court, having shared all our talents, until we have empty pockets and are as naked as the day we were born. As an example, as a teacher, we must remember that teaching is not reading the book ahead of the students, then repeating what was read. Students can read. Teaching is bringing to life the information from the book and aligning it into context, clarifying, emphasizing its relevance for tomorrow's practice. The health professional teacher has the unique asset of experience. We know what is important in practice. So we have to use that experience to select from all the facts what is most necessary and useful for the students to learn. And that is what we should teach. With humility, we have to learn to keep our ego in check. Avoid the overconfidence of presuming we always know what is best, or thinking we are better or more valuable than the other and expecting special treatment. We have to shun entitlement. At a recent gathering, I stood in queue for the buffet when a doctor from the PGH approached me, offering to bring me to the front. I thanked her but refused. Then suddenly, like a eureka moment, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're ethical." As we look at our weaknesses, biases, and limitations, we learn to accept only positions our capacity can fulfill. Not everyone can be Secretary of Agriculture or Secretary of Education. We avoid the folly of teaching an overdose of our specialty, since we know that best. We rather limit what we teach to what the student must know. We recognize that others may know better. We follow government and institutional rules. We come to class prepared and on time. We return corrected assignments and submit grades promptly. The dean is smiling. We ask and accept help from specialists, credible public health officials, relatives. We're open to dialogue, cooperation, collective decision-making. That is why we listen to stakeholders and empower them. Individual patients are asked free and informed consent to align management with their values. If terminally ill, this may mean to shift from promote health to just relieve suffering. In COVID, establishing patients' choices or the decision maker has to be made early, when the patient can still decide and express his decision. From communities, true and substantive engagement so that policies reflect their views, are fair and equitably based and implemented, so that research meets their needs. A repeated issue we met when reviewing researches done in the Philippines during the COVID pandemic was the unheard voices of communities. It is sad that many studies did not actually hit the needs of the community. We admit, I do not know. We ask forgiveness for mistakes and forgive others for theirs. For it is in forgiveness that we heal ourselves and heal beyond ourselves. And always we continue to strive for excellence. We prepare, learn, improve, and ask ourselves, did I do it right? What could I have done better? Humility as looking outwards or self-forgetfulness. Looking outwards is not thinking less of yourself, but it is thinking of yourself less. It is thinking of God. I am the Lord, there is no other. It is being prayerful. One benefit from COVID is that many of us returned to prayer. We prayed for ourselves, for our patients, our families, our friends, and even for our government officials. It is being grateful for our continued blessings, and it is not playing God, like making unilateral decisions regarding who should live and who should die. Humility is thinking of creation as beautiful but limited, and therefore to be conserved for the future generation. Humility as looking outwards is self-forgetfulness. Others, thinking of others as persons inherently valuable, unique, with individual purpose and goodness. Persons to be respected as equals, even when they disagree with us. We have no monopoly on the truth, or even own it. All we have is our version of it. Persons as part of our shared humanity, literally and ethically connected to us as our brothers. That is why we protect them against harm, even we may not actually know them. We accept restrictions of quarantine or social distancing so that others may not be contaminated. We closely supervise trainees so patients are not hurt when used for learning. We ensure that students are not overloaded with assignments or overstressed by deadlines. This is why we keep private information and our corrections of someone who has erred. We speak to them, but not of them, so as not to harm them. This is why we are considerate and do not make others wait. This is why we pray for peace in Israel, Palestine, and Ukraine. This is why we listen and empower. We offer students a blend of different learning experiences, readings, research, lectures, role plays, so that they can sculpt their own understanding of content and choose which approach best helps them. We guide, motivate, actively involve, specifically appreciate, even applaud subordinates. We do not look or talk down to them, not abuse, shame, bully, or exploit them as messengers, proctors, examination correctors. We do not cannibalize them and use their ideas. We criticize colleagues less and support them more. We don't take important positions for all plenary sessions in a convention, but we give them space to do their thing and let them shine. Compassion. Compassion is defined as regard and affection based on care and to relieve the other's suffering. It is awareness, which leads to sympathy, which leads to action. Paraphrasing John Kennedy, it looks not for what can be done to me, but what can I do for him. Compassion flows three ways: self-compassion, compassion directed towards others, and compassion received from others. As healthcare workers, none of us was prepared for the pain and distress wrought by the inadequacies and failures of COVID-19. It challenged our public image as tough and heroic, healthcare workers who risked their life for others. We avoided self-compassion or compassion from others, perceiving it as self-indulgent, self-pitying, weak. But healthcare workers are human, no different from other human beings. Not invincible, we too fall and have fallen, victim to the disease and its consequences. We too feel hurt when household members or neighbors stigmatize us as dangerous because we came from the hospital. Research shows that avoidance of self-compassion is consistently associated with negative mental health outcomes like depression, anxiety, stress, and vulnerability factors. We need self-compassion and compassion from others to stay healthy. Let us be humble and accept it. Compassion for others is not a single sympathetic utterance, but a presence and engagement that shows concern and kindness, that makes the other feel important. It is a shift from the golden rule of to treat others in a way you would like to be treated to Jackson's platinum rule of treat others as they would like to be treated. How we want to be treated should not be our standard. Rather, it should be how that particular person we are dealing with wants to be treated. Be he a patient, a student, a research participant, or a subordinate. Compassion. Amidst the inadequacies in healthcare provision, the looming food crisis, and the feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, enormous displays of compassion and voluntarism were seen during the epidemic. Community pantries supplied food for the hungry, support groups furnished masks, personal protective equipment, discounts, and queue exemptions for frontline workers. There were financial and spiritual aid for those affected or those who lost family. Not to belittle these generous actions, I would like to focus on two groups: the isolated older person and the wounded marginalized. Compassion for the isolated elderly. CNN took and published this photo of Dr. Joseph Varon from a medical center in Houston. In an accompanying interview, Dr. Varon narrated, "As I am going inside my COVID ward, I see this elderly patient is out of his bed and trying to get out of his room, and he is crying. So I get close to him, and I tell him, 'Why are you crying?' And the man says, 'I want to be with my wife.'" Of all the ways the coronavirus pandemic has undermined the conventions of normal life, perhaps none is as cruel as the separation of the seriously ill and their loved ones. As important as the isolated ICU patient is the isolated homebound older patient. For 3.5 years, she has been counting her relatives and friends who she has lost to COVID, missing her mahjong or dancing session with other seniors, her trips to church or to Mercury drugstore, has been frustrated trying to participate in digital conversation. She too is lonely and depressed and needs compassion. lessons from compassion. We must create a culture of sensitive caring. For the ICU patients, we must be present physicians. Make time and find ways to connect with the isolated patient with our eyes above the mask, using non-verbal cues. We might need to facilitate communication with separated families with the cell phone, iPod, or any new technology. Give that dying person a chance to say, "Forgive me, I forgive you, I love you, goodbye." For the locked-in homebound, we need to go near and cheer neglected family members and older friends, to spend a little time in genuine conversation, maybe once a week, to speak slowly and loud or use a whiteboard if she cannot hear, to be patient and listen. We need to let her feel she is loved and frequently to pray with and for her. Compassion for the wounded, marginalized. The challenge of the COVID pandemic did not merely revolve around fighting the disease as a public health disease. It magnified the hardship and deeply entrenched patterns of health inequity. It made visible the stark realities on the ground and its discriminatory impacts on class, age, occupation, and socioeconomic status. Those with resources, money, and power were able to physically distance, work from home, and retain employment. They had lower risks of becoming infected or dying. In comparison, those already vulnerable, the unstably housed, the unemployed, or of low income, those with poorer education, individuals without nutrition, clean water, fresh air, basic services, they are the ones who became infected with the virus and many died. They suffered the physical, social, and economic consequences which further widened the health divide. In addition, they were misinformed, disinformed, cheated by greedy profiteers with wonder drugs, sure preventive measures, plastic dividers who took advantage of their naivety and their preconditioned acceptance of dishonesty, injustice, and corruption. Already wounded, those who lived in one-room, windowless dwellings without running water were further insulted by orders like isolate, ventilate, or wash your hands. Wala naman kaming window, wala kaming water. Or statement like, we're all equal, we're all in this together. Lesson for the marginalized. We must be sensitive to their feelings. Avoid ostentatious display and malicious comments. Let's show off lavish celebrations, fashion shows, trips abroad. Less comments like, they're poor because they're lazy. We must protect them against abuse, deception, disregard, and unfair practice. We must enlighten them about COVID, be a mini call center, speak in webinars, town halls, and similar public fora, write in social media. We are influencers and should use our influence to enlighten. At the start of the COVID pandemic, my niece who teaches at the Ateneo asked me to write an article on COVID for Areta, their publication. So I wrote in layman's terms about the virus, its transmission, its usual symptoms, and how to protect oneself. The article had 49,000 hits, a manifestation of the people's need for correct information. We must enlighten them that they are neither hopeless nor helpless, that they have rights and power to use their conscience to decide and restore their dignity. support leaders who are competent and seek the common good, and to pray for those who are not. Enlighten them that love for their children and grandchildren is expressed by their acting responsibly. Quoting Dietrich Bonhoeffer, to be silent and not to teach them in the face of evil is itself evil. Many times, our regret and sorrow about those suffering from COVID is rooted on the thought that their suffering could be our own, that we may be harmed. But we should go beyond ourselves, move because people are suffering and should not, seek an equitable distribution of resources that embrace health as a common good. In COVID, measures taken were largely to bludgeon the epidemic into submission, prioritizing reducing viral transmission. Today, we should look beyond the here and now. Our focus should be on building a world that is healthy and resilient to the challenges, on not getting sick to begin with. We should do everything in our power to promote the conditions that make people healthy. Clean air, drinking water, safe housing, good schools, livable wages. Conditions that will benefit both in time of crisis and no crisis. Even if we may never see the results of our actions or never know the people we have helped. Courage. To act requires courage. Courage is essentially an existential choice, a decision and commitment to stand out and withstand what Shakespeare in Hamlet called the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. It is to pick oneself up, remain calm, and carry on when wounded or knocked down, repeatedly, stubbornly, gracefully. To persevere rather than quit. True courage is not mere bravado. It is the day-to-day getting out of one comfort zone, saying what has to be said, like imparting bad news to a patient or a family, reporting an adverse event, doing what has to be done, like making decisions without current guidelines, or sitting and holding a patient's hand as he dies, and dealing with people who have to be dealt with, like the stubborn know-it-all unwilling to follow public health recommendations, or the BIR inspector tax mapping our clinic. It is doing the ordinary extraordinarily in the face of adversity and despite unpleasant consequences. In the COVID experience, it is to consistently act with authenticity and integrity rather than for expedience, to be transparent and honest in communication and conduct. Some of our leaders had courage. More were cowards. Lessons. To be courageous means learning, to live with integrity, to place integrity at the cornerstone of every decision we make, to be willing to do what is right above what is convenient, to veer off the safe and comfortable path onto the less traveled one, where the risk of failure or disapproval may be high. To embrace uncertainties rather than to be held captive by it, to find that spot between pessimism that paralyzes and optimism that leaves us unprepared, to be flexible and creative, to make trade-offs, take risks, decide then act, and accept responsibility for our action, to be involved and not indifferent, to animate the struggle to dismantle the different dimensions of injustice, poverty, health disparities, to dare to dream and work for transformation, constructive social change, morally defensible governance, strength and leadership. The greater danger is not that our dreams are too lofty, but that we fail and we fail to reach them. But they are too small, and we do. We need to dream high and strive to realize that we are meant for more. To be a strong voice that asks ethical, critical questions about conflicts of interest, confidential funds, knowing this will simplistically be equated with an anti-government agenda, kalaban ng bayan, or red tagging. A voice that raises alarm bells about ridiculous foreign trips, increasing costs of onions, tomatoes, rice, that conscience objects against unethical policy, that whistle blows when students cheat and colleagues breach the hard-earned trust we have earned, that speaks less about violence, killings, wars, tragedies, and more about kindness, generosity, justice, bayanihan, peace, and love. I was part of a group where members wrote one letter every week to a government official or a public figure. And we had to either praise them for what they did well or criticize them for what they did wrong. And you know, anybody can do that, and it helps. With social media, you can write. It will help. Ang nagmamahal ay handang ipaglabang ang minamahal. Find, admire, celebrate, emulate, and be role models. We do not need always a Maria Risa. There are many among our co-workers, family members, mothers who wait to eat last, making sure their children can eat enough. Fathers who wake up early to bring their children to school safely. Professionals who regularly serve in the parish, all doing small things with great love. Our people need encouragement and affirmation that to do good, to be good, is good. We need to awaken their inner power to be good. Our students need role models in the classroom and in the clinic to imitate. We must be the role model to edify. And finally, having done the best you can, to trust God. Do not be afraid. Good will prevail over evil, despite 31 million who chose the thief. Emerging from the pandemic, we are changed, but our problems and the chaos that surround us persist. We must use the COVID experience to grow and learn. Use it as a portal to emerge not back to normal, but to a new normal better than the one before, with an enhanced ethical behavior. We must trust the Lord and be trustworthy. Be a virtue culture that defines our person and identifies others. In every situation, to listen, share, respect, and help, and be grateful for each other, and maintain the constancy of mission to serve. I pray that each of us find the joy which Pope Francis spoke about, the joy that arises from being able to help without hesitation and persevere, that each of us may grow to become the person we are called to be. Maraming salamat.